Hi everyone. Today we're going to do another chapter in Murder in the Kollel. Today we're going to do chapter 22, Murder. The Rebbetzin was seated on a kitchen chair in her normal position, half a tochas on and half a tochas off the chair. She was sipping a cup of tea when we entered, but stood when she saw us and approached Daphna with concern on her face. I suppose a normal woman would have hugged Daphna, but of course Devorah Klein did not do hugs. Daphna, you have no idea how worried I was for you, said the Rebbetzin emotionally. That man held you with a knife. Oh my God, you are so brave. That's interesting. How did she know that? The Kleins, like other ultra-Orthodox Jews, did not have a TV. Oh, then I realized she could watch the news on her computer. There really was not much bravery involved, said Daphna. He was holding me by the hair and had a knife to my throat. I just stood there and tried not to move. I would have died on the spot, said Rebbetzin Klein. Please sit down, said Daphna. We all found seats while Shandel fixed us up with coffee. Daphna took a sip from her cup and asked the Rebbetzin, is there something you need? You usually do not come without calling first. I know, but I call a dozen times and no one answered, said Devorah in explanation. That's true, said Daphna. We have been busy. I am just beside myself with worry, she said. After all, everything that happened to you is my fault. That got my attention. How so? Well, you're both investigating the death of my late husband, she said, looking from me to Daphna. You're doing this for his memory and my peace of mind. I feel responsible. If either of you were hurt, I don't know what I would do. The risks come with the job, I said. Then Daphna proudly repeated after me, the risks come with the job. I just wish to thank you both. It means so much to me, she said emotionally. Once again, I saw that little flutter in her eyes. She was hiding something. I just did not know what it could be. We're happy to do it, said Daphna. There was an awkward silence. Then the Rebbetzin asked, was the attack of the Arabs related to my husband's death? Apparently so, responded Daphna. They wanted to stop Mr. Lincoln from continuing his investigation. The Rebbetzin looked at me and then said with a sigh of relief, Baruch Hashem, they were not successful. Daphna then told Devorah how someone had used the internet to set us up with the Dearborn rabble. Unbelievable, said Devorah, shaking her head from side to side to accentuate her disbelief. Then, as if it was an afterthought, have you made any progress in my husband's death? I know that Daphna is convinced that the Rebbetzin is in the clear, but I did not like her sharing any more information with the Rebbetzin Klein. But there was little I could do to stop her, short of shouting out, I think you may have killed the rabbi. Actually, yes, said Daphna. She then explained to Rebbetzin my revelation with my necktie. The Rebbetzin looked at me and said, how clever of you. I shrugged and said, that's why they pay me the big bucks. Devorah looked confused. Someone paid you big bucks? It's just an expression, explained Daphna. The lady had absolutely no sense of humor. Devorah stated, so that means that there's no doubt that this was not a suicide. Absolutely, stated Daphna confidently. So who do the police suspect, she asked. They must have some suspects. Actually, they don't, I said. I did not want to mention Alice Weinstein until we had more information. They have not as yet seen my proof that it was a homicide, but I will be going over there in a few minutes. We're also still trying to figure out how the murderer got past your security system. I never thought of that, said the Rebbetzin with a vexed expression. Yes, she did. There was that little eye flutter. Right now we're looking for a car that we think was the vehicle that the murderer used, said Daphna. You found the murderer's car? Asked Rebbetzin with interest. We've not found it. We're looking for it. A white Chevy, said Daphna. And when you find that car, how will you help? How will that help your investigation, she asked. That depends on where we find it and what we find in it, I said. Most criminals are careless. They make mistakes. By studying the mistakes, we find the criminals. We're very hopeful. Baruch Hashem for stupid criminals, said Rebbetzin. I see you have your work cut out for you. If there's anything I can do to help, please just ask. Now was my opportunity to ask her about the visits to the psychologist. There is something, I said with a most beguiling smile. We were wondering, I saw Daphna shaking her head ever so slightly. She had read my intention and was asking me not to grill the Rebbetzin. Could you think of us in your prayers? We wish for our success. Devorah smiled broadly, and that made her nose dip so sharply. Believe me, you're in my prayers all the time. What did that mean? What was so important that you had to call Dalton from an active investigation? Asked Slattery, putting his feet up on his desk. Julie Dalton pulled up a chair and looked at me inquisitively. I surveyed them both and began, you remember when you told me about how the rabbi died, that he threw the rope over the water pipe, tied it off, and then put the noose over his head and stepped off the chair? That is also the way Detective Dalton wrote it up in her notes. Yeah, so what? Think about it for a second, I said. Why did you say that in that order? Why couldn't he have put the noose over his head and then thrown the rope over the water pipe and tie it off? And Julie answered, because the rope was tied to a post that was out of his reach once he was standing on the chair. Exactly. So Rabbi Klein was standing on the chair when he put the noose around his neck, I said. Of course it's Slattery. That's the only way he could have done it. Now look at these pictures, I said. I put down a half a dozen pictures showing the rabbi's body hanging from the rope. What do you see? Stop playing games, said Slattery angrily. We see the body, but what is it you want us to see? Obviously it's something we missed, so explain. Look at the different shots taken from the different angles, I said, pointing to the pictures. How far below the seat of the chair are the victim's ankles? Dalton looked carefully at a few of the shots and said, about 3 or 4 inches. Yeah, that's about right, agreed Slattery. Now look at his neck, I instructed. I see the neck squeezing the hell out of his neck, said the sergeant. Correct again, I agreed. The pathologist estimates that the rabbi's neck circumference in life was 17 inches, or about a 6-inch diameter. When the rabbi stepped off the chair and he was hanging on the rope, the circumference went down to 12 inches, or a 4-inch diameter. This crushed his windpipe and cut off the blood flow to his brain. Are you giving us a lesson in pathology? Asked Slattery. Just give me a second, I insisted. So if he stepped off the chair with the noose around his neck, he would wind up about 4 inches below the chair. Slattery said testily, that's exactly what we see in the pictures. Yes, I agreed, but in order to get the rope over his head, the rabbi would have had to open the noose to about 30 inches circumference or a 10-inch diameter. Of course, said Slattery, that's how you put on a noose. Exactly. But to get that slack, you have to slide the noose back up on the rope, I said. So what? Asked Slattery angrily. Don't you see? I asked. Oh, yeah, said Dalton in surprise. How did I miss that? Miss what? Asked the confused Slattery. He's too high, said Dalton. Who is too high? Asked Slattery. I just sat back and let Julie explain things to Jumping Jack. The rabbi is, said Julie. There is no way if he could put the loosened noose over his head if he was standing on the chair. It would have been 6 or 8 inches too high for him to reach it. After all, he couldn't jump up and push his head through. And if it had been low enough for him to get the noose over his head, he should have been 6 or 8 inches lower than he is in these pictures. Jumping Jack picked up the pictures and after studying them carefully, threw them down angrily and said, holy crap, you're right. I did not really buy that water bottle business and the missing urine thing before, but all that has changed. This is a homicide. For the next 2 hours, I worked with Julie Dalton going over the material Daphne had gone through and all the information in the case file from the new murder perspective. I told them how Daphne had isolated the white Malibu Impala Chevy in an area in Shiawassee County and Slattery put out an alert to the county sheriff. The police officially opened the homicide investigation on the Rabbi Klein case, and Slattery pulled in 2 more detectives to work on the file. I gave them the picture of Alice Weinstein and all the information related to the suit against Hillard House and Rabbi Klein. His people would investigate. He also asked me not to investigate the people closest to Rabbi because he wanted his detectives to question them first. They were through with me for now, and my plans for talking to some of the suspects was put on hold. I decided this was a good time to make a visit to Eagle Security, the company that monitored the Klein house. Maybe they could tell me how someone could bypass the system. Eagle was located about a half-mile from Celebration Cinema in South Lansing. The huge movie complex that Rebbetzin Klein had visited on the night her husband was killed. The huge movie complex that Rebbetzin Klein had visited on the night her husband was killed. Since I was in the area, I decided to swing down Edgewood Boulevard to see the theater complex for myself. Just as described, the giant freestanding complex was far back from the main road and surrounded on 3 sides by parking lot. The south side had a much smaller lot because it backed up against the I-96 freeway. There were a few chain restaurants between the complex and Edgewood Boulevard, and they too were surrounded by parking lots. Even the Edgewood Town Center, a large strip mall to the east of the theaters, was just another island in a sea of parking lots. There were no alleys, no indoor garages, and no hiding places for the white Chevy. If it was Alice Weinstein, where could she be hiding? I could not come up with a thing. It was hard to make my mind switch to where I did not suspect a Rebbitzin. My gut plays tricks on me. Had to work on that. I drove down the road slowly looking at the buildings in the distance when I suddenly saw something we had not noticed before. For some reason, it just didn't show up in any of the surveillance videos. Just off the boulevard on American Road was the WILX TV station. It had a small broadcast tower and an even smaller building studio. The station had a small tent-space parking lot. This place was unique. It was open 24 hours, and it was very likely that no one would notice a white Chevy that just happened to be parked there overnight. There we go again. Rebbitzin Klein had an alibi, and she could not have done it. Stop that. I drove over to Eagle and met with their head engineer, Mike Sanguin. When we sat down, he asked me to turn off my cell phone while in the engineering section because it interfered with some of their monitoring equipment. Then we went to a conference room, and he was more than happy to pull up all the records on the Klein house and show me the alarm registry for the dates in question. He spread all the data in front of us on a table and went through each of the documents thoroughly. To my specific question concerning a bypass switch for any of the doors, he showed me the circuit diagrams and specs for the system indicating that there was no bypass switches. The place was inspected every 2 years to check the integrity of the system, and the last inspection was 2 months before the rabbi died. If there had been such a switch on any of the doors or windows, the inspector would have indicated it on the report. So I still had no idea how the murderer had gotten past the security system. As I was leaving Eagle Security, I switched my phone back on and noticed that 1/2 hour earlier, I had received a text message from Dafna. White Chevy spotted on 9369 West Britton Road, just east of Woodbury Road, in Langsburg, Shiawassee, Michigan. This is great news. The Shiawassee County Sheriff's Department deserves a commendation. But why did I get the message from Dafna and not the police, and why didn't she just call me? I called Dafna's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. Strange. I was on the southwest side of the greater Lansing area, and the address given in the text message was way to the northeast in a rural area I had never visited. I keyed the address into the navigation system on my smartphone, not as fast as the GPS I had in my own car, but before it was blown to smithereens, but it would get me to my destination. The system said it would take 27 minutes, and it usually knew what it was talking about. This could be the break we were looking for. With great optimism, I hit the starter, and the little red Hyundai coughed and sputtered until the motor caught, and then it courageously conveyed me towards the next step in the investigation. That's the end of chapter 22. Tomorrow we'll do chapter 23.